Hi everyone, my name is Dominique Higgins, and today I'm going to talk to you about ADUs, my favorite topic, accessory dwelling units. So an accessory dwelling unit in the past has gone by many different names: backyard home, granny flat, granny unit, second home, so on and so forth. But legally, they are required to be called an accessory dwelling unit per state standards. So an accessory dwelling unit is essentially an independent residential unit that can be added to a lot with an existing single-family home, or can be built in congruence with a single-family home. It has its own kitchen, its own bath, its own living space, its own separate entrance from the main home. It's its own independent unit, almost like a guest house, around the same type of concept. ADUs, it's important to know though that ADUs are legally called just that because that was a state requirement that came into about 2017 because a lot of cities just didn't like ADUs at all. And so the state essentially gave everyone a choice. They said, we have these minimum standards for ADUs that we want to see. They're required. So if your current law doesn't meet these, then ours will apply by default, essentially. So this is important and helpful because as an agent, as a developer, if you're kind of looking for a quick way to know if your city or jurisdiction has a new ADU law or is defaulting to the state's standards, which are much more flexible, by the way, you just can look in the zoning code that they have. If you pull up the name that they have for ADUs, if it's an old name, that'll tell you, bam, right there, that their laws on the books are outdated, null and void, and the state standards will apply. Now, ADUs come in two main forms, detached or attached. Detached ADUs, by the state standards, can be a maximum of 1,200 square feet, no matter the size of the existing single-family home. So these can be standalone structures, conversions of a detached garage, storage room, she shed, he shed, anything essentially that was legally created and detached, or they can sit on top of your garage. Now, attached accessory dwelling units are limited in size. They can only be 50% of the square footage of the main home. Attached ADUs can be fun because you can convert existing living space that you have, convert an attached garage, or even do a newly built addition. So one of my favorite parts about the accessory dwelling unit standards that the state passed is there is no off-street parking required if the ADU is within a half mile of a bus or train stop, which is really cool because this covers a lot of properties essentially. Or if your city is in a historic district, or if you decide to do convert existing square footage in your home. Additionally, if your city has on-street parking permits and they refuse to give them to your ADU occupant, or you're within a block of a car share area, you don't have to provide additional off-street parking, which is a godsend in California, let's be honest. So if, however, your property for some reason doesn't meet any of those five standards, then you will have to provide a minimum of one parking space per bedroom or unit. At max, one space though. So fun part about that is the space can be uncovered or tandem parking. However, I think certain cities are starting to limit these, but even by state standards, they're not supposed to, but that's a whole different conversation. Moving on. So additional state standards that are really good to keep in mind with an accessory dwelling unit is it cannot be sold separately from the primary residence, but it can be rented. Now, rented usually on a monthly basis because a lot of cities are now tamping down hardcore on people who are building accessory dwelling units and renting them out to Airbnb. So just keep that in mind. I don't know what your specific city or jurisdiction's rules are, but you definitely want to give them a look if this is kind of your angle as far as how you want to use your ADU. Now, moving on, we talked about a bunch of these different standards. Another fun one to touch on is there are no setback requirements for your ADU if you convert an existing garage. So it can be a garage sitting on the lot line as long as it's existing and you decide to convert it into an ADU. then you're not required essentially to provide any setbacks for that. Now, you still do have to comply with local building codes and health and safety standards. However, essentially, the state standards still apply and take precedent. Now, why build an ADU? Honestly, there are a ton of different reasons why you can build an ADU. My personal favorite is you do kind of get that boost in square footage that honestly, the value that you can extract from the square footage that you're building works in your favor. So you can get a boost in your property's values, as well as making the property that much more marketable to a lot more people, because again, you're building something that can generate revenue. Like, that's huge, especially now in today's housing climate. Like, a lot of people in terms of financing like to see something that could potentially help them pay for the mortgage of the property. So really, those are the three main reasons why I love the idea of building ADUs. From there, I wanted to touch on why these are so popular now. Really wanted to drive this home. Cities used to hate ADUs so much. They would do everything that they could in their power not to let these through. And up until, of course, the state passed these two laws, 2299 and 1089, back in 2017. So really, again, I know I've beat these to death, but these laws are great because they prohibited the outright ban for ADUs that a lot of cities across California had. Another reason why these laws are so great is because that should an ADU meet specific requirements, then you remove a lot of the different hoops that cities were requiring people to jump through in order to get these approved. So now the state, again, came in and said, no more hoops. If an ADU is within an existing structure, it's independent, it meets the setbacks, garage conversions are okay. If it meets those different points, within 4 months, cities, you have to give a response. You have to give them a yes or a no. You can no more stringing people along. Give them an answer so that they can either reapply, make the corrections, and go from there, or just approve it at that point. And so that's also a big reason why a lot of these are popular and you're hearing about them a lot more, because of these two laws that passed, and because the cities have basically they have to be held accountable now for a lot of the actions that they did in the past. So that's why they're growing in popularity. Now, the process is pretty straightforward. Really begins with knowing your city's requirements for your property ahead of time. A lot of this information can be found online. Again, you can Google search what's my city's zoning code, go from there, check out the ordinance. So I like, in this process, knowing this stuff ahead of time, even before I go to the city, because honestly, the times that I've gone, in my personal experience, gone to the city cold, I'll get this face. Like, honestly, some planners, they're just out of touch. It's not their specialty, and so they either won't know the information, they'll give you misinformation, they'll use I went to the city of Southgate once, and they were still passing out the 1988 information, and that was a long time ago. But yeah, honestly, save yourself the time, save yourself the confusion. Do your research ahead of time. And honestly, a lot of these cities, they've been fighting over ADUs for so long, some of them are still discouraging people from building ADUs. They're honestly still holding up their hands and saying, oh, well, we don't know, what ADU? What's that? What's called a set? No. Cut the BS. Know your stuff ahead of time. That way you can really go confidently into the city. Tell them and make sure that they know that you know the laws have changed, and you really just want answers specific to your property. And I feel in my experience that has really helped kind of shift the conversation to make it more helpful and getting more clarity on what actually needs to be done in order to get these approved. From there, you really want to sketch out ideas for an ADU, get an idea of what you're looking for. What I really like to do is check out different approved permits that are online. LA City has a really great website, actually, which is pretty cool for this. And from there, really getting bids from local contractors, really just giving them an idea of the size that you're looking for, an idea of what they might charge you per square footage. so you can start figuring out the fun part, how you're going to pay for it. So that also becomes a very important step. Where are you going to get the money for, not only for the construction, but just preparing the lot, getting the plans done, paying the architect, paying the application fees. There are a lot of different costs that kind of go into it, and they all differ for each city. So I would also make sure you go to the city and know how much those fees are going to cost you too, and make sure that you get an idea of what they all are, and that none of them come up kind of last minute and shock you at the end, because that will really throw a budget, let's be honest. From there, you want to get plans engineered, get them designed, work with an architect, a designer, a design build firm, who have you, someone who has experience with these. Get them to get everything to the city along with your application fees, to get the process started. From there, I would say the last and most important step was really staying on top of your designer that you've chosen and the city planning department. So you don't want to badger people. You don't want to be an a-hole who's like calling every day, yelling at them. Not what I'm encouraging here at all. But what I am saying is you definitely want to be consistently in touch, because your designer is working with a lot of different people, and they might get behind. The city planning, what they'll often do is kick back applications with corrections that need to be made. And so if your designer, your architect, or you aren't able to respond to those within a couple of days, and then you decide not to respond, for days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, and then you're really just elongating the whole process unnecessarily. As long as you stay responsive, you can really cut down on the amount of time that's spent getting them actually approved, which is great, because that means you can break ground sooner. So that's the last step in this presentation that I wanted to highlight on. Again, I really love the idea of ADUs. I really, really, really wish that more people were building them, designing them. What I am curious to know is why people out there are not building these. If you could kind of let me know, drop it in the comments. Is it just that you're not used to the idea? What would you like to learn more about with ADUs? What's kind of stopping people out there from developing these? I would really actually like to know. So let me know. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and hope you enjoyed.